Part 224. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2235. Big Brother, Fu Fu glanced at Ergo, and whispered in Jin Kuyan's ear, "We have already looked for inns in the city, and without them, no such person has even come to stay." Jin Kuyan couldn't help looking at Ergo and asked with a sullen face, "Are you sure they are going to the western regions?" Ergo's heart sank, but his face remained calm, and he asked, "Since you have seen them in the desert inn, you should know that the road will definitely lead to Shazhu. Did you find out, they have already arrived in Shazhu, or have you left?" "No," Jin Kuyan said with a gloomy expression, "they didn't arrive in Shazhu." Erg froze for a moment and then said, "Impossible, they have to go to Yumen Pass to go to the western regions. Besides, they have no way to go, and since they have been to the desert inn, they will definitely come to Shazhu. Did something happen to them on the way?" Jin Kuyan also hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said, "There are quite a few of them, and this desert is not very big, so they won't get lost, there's no storm, and if something goes wrong, there won't be any traces on the road." He paused and said, "In addition to going to Shazhu, that road can also turn to Suzhou." "But what are they going to do in Suzhou?" Ergo doubted. "If you go to Suzhou, is there another way closer? There's no need to go to the desert inn." "There is another possibility. They still want to come to Shazhu, but they first turn around and go back through another road. That official road goes through Suzhou." Ergo looked up at him with doubts in his eyes. Jin Kuyan did not explain, but said, "Didn't you say they are prudent people?" Ergo asked, "Did you threaten them while you were in the desert inn?" Jin Kuyan sneered and didn't answer, but lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before saying, "Leave 3 people, the others will follow me to Suzhou on the official road. It is best to meet them on the road. Now Suzhou to Shazhu, the area is not stable, and if we solve them on the road, the government will not think much about it." Jin Kuyan quickly made up his mind. They were already several days behind them. If they didn't hurry up, they might really lose people. It was a truckload of gold and silver jewelry. Ergo naturally went with them. Before leaving, he said to the wealthy who stayed behind, "If we encounter them coming back before we come back, don't do anything, try to find out about them, and if you can, join their team." Jin Kuyan said with deep eyes. Said, "In short, we must get the gold and silver on them." "Yes." Jin Kuyan quietly left Shazhu with people and changed lanes to Suzhou, but what he thought was quiet was not quiet. As soon as he left Shazhu inspector, he immediately contacted General Meng at Yumengwan, saying that those who needed to be on guard ran back. After sending someone to deliver the letter, Inspector he felt that something was wrong. Who are those people, and why did they run back? He frowned and asked, "You're not looking for someone, are you?" "Sir, do you want to send someone to Suzhou to speak?" Inspector he sighed, "Can our people go to Suzhou now?" The master paused for a while, but did not speak. Hisashi remembered that the road was cut off, and he gritted his teeth a little. "I don't know who spread these rumors. You go, and let people go out to refute the rumors. Your Majesty is in peace, Xiaohu is safe, and the Central Plains are also stable. Let everyone be honest." "Yes." Inspector he rushed to refute the rumor early in the morning, but Manbao and the others only got up at this time. She stuck her head out of the car window, yawned, retracted her head and closed the car window, and then she and Zhou Liru helped each other brush their hair before jumping out of the car. The two of them took a small wooden basin and went to Director Li to get water to wash. Because there is little water in the desert, the water for washing is only enough to wet the handkerchief, and the excess is gone. The grey-faced Yu and the others sat aside and watched, and turned their heads in confusion. What was wrong with not washing their faces for a day? It was normal for them not to wash their faces for half a month when they were in the desert. Therefore, Yu took the lead in rejecting Li Guanshifen's water, saying that they only need to drink and nothing else. Steward Li glanced at them approvingly, then turned around and went to divide the water for the young master and them. They don't have to be just right, the young master and Miss Man can use more. The group was busy for half an hour, the sun rose a lot, the cold disappeared, and everyone started to hurry when it started to get a little warm. Heavy Rain couldn't help but ask Joe Man and the others, "How many days do you plan to travel to Shazhu like this?" Man Bao said, "We have calculated, we can arrive in about 12 to 18 days. The difference between you is long enough." Man Bao said, "No way, no one knows what will be encountered on the road." Heavy Rain, "Don't worry, we did the math before going out, and we won't encounter a sandstorm. I mean, I don't know if there will be any interesting people, interesting things on the road. If there are, we may need to stay longer." Heavy Rain, "I feel that the mayor has miscalculated, and they should agree on a time with them, otherwise they will encounter an interesting place like their town on the road, and what if they have to stay for 10 or 20 days? This 100 taels of silver is too hard to earn, right? There are still 20 people, and that person is, you calculated with his fingers, and found that he couldn't figure it out, so he just didn't count it. Anyway, there shouldn't be many, otherwise the housekeeper will definitely envy them when they go out." Since he didn't envy them, then they were at a loss this time. Even if you lose some, how can you lose so much? So the Heavy Rain urged Joe Man and Bai Shan to speed up, preferably to reach Shazhu within 10 days. In fact, it is possible. If you march in a hurry, you can arrive in 7 or 8 days. But Man Bao refused because there were old people, Mr. Zhuang, and young people, Zhou Liru, in the team. Heavy Rain turned to look at Mr. Zhuang, who was looking at the outside with the window open, and Zhou Liru, who was riding in front of him. He was speechless for a while. The group walked slowly forward. When they encountered an oasis, they replenished their drinking water. When they saw something good, they tried to get some to take a look. Occasionally, they ran a long way to catch a gerbil, causing the team to have to advance an hour earlier. Stationed and waited for them. The Heavy Rain was worn out along the way, and he finally saw the city gate of Shazhu after half a month, and his tears were about to fall. Finally reached. Finally reached. This is also the voice of Man Bao and theirs. Seeing the high city gate, everyone screamed with excitement. Man Bao even threw the veil cap up and caught it when it fell. She buttoned the veil cap and lifted the veil. In front of the finger, he said loudly and proudly, "Chong Ya, let's go to the city." The people who were not far away turned their heads back to look at them in shock. Someone had already rushed into the city in advance to warn them. Nikan Jun. He had to change into his official uniform to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. When Bai Shan and the others saw it, they couldn't help but look at Man Bao and burst out laughing. The people at the city gate saw it from a distance, twitched the corners of their mouths and turned around to ask their colleagues, "Does this look like an enemy attack?" Those youngsters looked like they came from an aristocratic family to experience it. Where is the bandit in them? See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2236. Arriving at the city gate, Steward Li immediately trotted forward and handed in their official documents and directions, then bowed his head and bowed his apology to the soldiers who were already lined up at the city gate. "Our Lady has been walking in the desert for more than 10 days, and suddenly I saw this. A big city is a little more excited, forgive me, forgive me." The general guarding the city gate turned over their documents and found that they were still on business, and their expressions were much better. Coupled with the compliment from Steward Li, they reluctantly forgave their rashness, waved the soldiers to disperse, and then checked them. The official document and Lu attracted, "Are you going to leave the customs?" "Yes, we are going to the western regions." The general frowned, "It's not easy to go outside the customs now, it's a little chaotic, You have to go to General Meng to get a letter when you leave the customs. If it's too dangerous, the general may not allow you to leave the customs. Bai Shan, who was riding on a horse, heard it and couldn't help dismounting. Can the merchants from the western regions from the east and the central plains merchants from the west also not be able to enter or leave the customs? You can go out. The side general looked up at him and said, private entry and exit is not prohibited. Then why can't the official body? Because if the officials have an accident outside the customs, we will have to send troops to rescue the general. Businessmen entering and exiting the pass are seeking wealth and wealth at risk, and they should all have this awareness before making a decision. If they encounter the Yumen Pass garrison, they will naturally rescue them, but if they don't, they will not run to rescue them. But the officials are different, not to mention that there will be demands from the imperial court, that is, for the sake of the great Jingguo, for the friendship of colleagues, they have to send troops to rescue them when they receive news. But the vast land outside, the marching distance is uncertain, and the cost is very large. Therefore, for the safety of life and property, it is best not to leave the border. He turned over the paperwork, stamped it and returned it to them. Go in. Steward Li respectfully took it, and asked casually, Sir, I don't know how to get to the post in Shazhu city. The general glanced at him up and down, then turned to look at Bai Shan, saw the delicate dark lines on his sleeves, and got up. You want to stay at the inn. Bai Shan doesn't know what's wrong with these words. They are businessmen. Where do they live without the station? So nod. The general just pointed to the city and said, Go in, turn right at the third intersection, go down to the bottom, and there is a plaque on it. After speaking, the general smiled and showed 2 rows of teeth. If you don't want to live in the inn, it's also good to live in the inn next door. It was only when Bai Shan and the others followed the general's instructions to the end that they truly understood what he meant. More than 100 people in the audience were all shocked on the spot, and they were silent for a while. Man Bao rode on the horse, raised her neck to look at the plaque of the station. She might feel that her hat was blocking her vision. She even put the hat up and blinked, but the station in front of her remained unchanged. Half of the door is still patched with wooden strips, and the words on the plaque are a bit smudged. Looking in from the door, the entire inn has 2 floors, but it looks grey and dilapidated. Man Bao couldn't help swallowing his saliva. The guy who was sitting with a small bench inside saw that they were not leaving, so he stood up, walked to the door to see them, and asked hesitantly, Are the guest officials wanting to stay at the store? Everyone's eyes fell on him from top to bottom. The guy was startled, seeing more than 100 people staring at him. He ducked back, then pointed to the inn next door and said, If the guests are staying at the inn, you can go to the inn diagonally opposite, there. Nice house. Bai Shan gave him a deep look and asked, Can't people live in the inn? The guy tangled and said, Yes, yes, but does the son want to live? Man Bao said, We are officials. The guy understood in an instant, and immediately pointed to the inn diagonally opposite. Adults can go there to live, and all officials who come to live there will only receive a 20% discount, and there will be hot water and hot soup as a gift. Man Bao emphasized, We live in the inn for free. Bai Erlang and the others also jumped out of the carriage, glanced around the station and sighed, This station is on par with the abandoned stations on the Liangzhou grassland. It's just that those post stations are on the grassland, and the people in the post stations have been evacuated, so this can be desolate like that. This one is in the city of Shazhu. Man Bao pursed his lips and looked at the man seriously, Where's your postmaster? Although it has been several months since the man arrived at the inn, this is the first time he has met someone who wants to stay there, especially since the other party has brought so many people with him. The guards and soldiers are full of suffocation, and he is startled when he sees it. So he didn't cover up at all. He pointed at the gate that was still inhabited diagonally opposite, and almost cried, We are on the opposite side. Just finished speaking, the movement here has already attracted the attention of the other side. A guy from the opposite inn arranged for the new arrivals and immediately trotted out to welcome them out. He ran to the front of Steward Lee and greeted him with a smile on his face. Said, "Do you want to live in the store? Our store is more spacious, otherwise go to our store and see." Man Bao and Bai Shanja gave him a condescending look, then glanced over at the guy who shrank his neck, snorted coldly and asked, "Where's your boss?" The guy's smile froze. "Guest officials are looking for our boss. Our boss is not there, so what are your requirements are the same as what we said." Bai Shan and Man Bao didn't speak, and the scene froze for a while. Mr. Zhuang knocked on the carriage, and the two recovered, immediately dismounted and walked back to the carriage. "Sir," Mr. Zhuang said, "since you can't make up your mind, just go to the station, put your luggage in the car, and unload it after you make up your mind. You can just take a look at the situation inside." Bai Shan and Man Bao were sure that with their husband as their backer, neither of them felt that they were fighting or causing trouble, and waved their hands directly. "Go, enter the inn." The guy at the inn opened his mouth slightly, and quickly reached out his hand to stop him. He subconsciously said, You can't go in." Nai's soldiers raised their eyebrows, raised their swords, and shouted, "Bold, dare to be disrespectful to adults." The guy was startled. His hand was just one hand. Bai Shan glanced at him, stretched out his hand and led Man Bao in. The guy at the station on the side did not dare to stop him, but he opened his mouth wide. Seeing that their guards came forward to dismantle the threshold, he immediately returned to his senses. "In." The guy scratched his head, and before he had time to think about these things, he hurriedly went to guide Bai Shan and the others, but he himself didn't know where to lead people. There wasn't even a bedding in the house, but fortunately it was clean, but it smelled musty. It seemed that no one had lived there for a long time. Bai Shan stretched out his finger and touched the table, and asked the cramped guy, "Who cleans these rooms?" He immediately bowed and said, "Yes, it's small." Bai Shan nodded and asked, "What's your name?" "Little Ren Ergu." Bai Shan couldn't help but smile, nodded after suppressing a smile, and said solemnly, "Good name." The guy blushed with excitement. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2237. Bai Erlang ran upstairs from downstairs. We've seen it later, it's almost the same as here, not to mention the bedding. Some rooms don't even have tables and chairs, and there are several chairs in the main room that are missing. With a broken arm and a leg, I said, "How long has it been since your inn has no people?" Ren Ergu could only please smile. Bai Shan pointed to the inn diagonally opposite and asked, "Is that inn opened by your postmaster?" "Yes," Ren Ergu said slyly, "Sir, there has been no one in this inn for many years, and most of the officials who come here live in the inn opposite." Bai Shan asked, "I see there is an inn next door. Who runs it?" Ren Ergu scratched his head and shook his head, "I don't know, but it's the shopkeeper Zhang next door." Bai Shan just arrived, how could he know who the shopkeeper Zhang is? Man Bao asked directly, "Who is shopkeeper Zhang?" Ren Ergu, "Manager Zhang is the shopkeeper Zhang. He is quite nice, and sometimes he will greet me when he sees me cleaning the door, so I will clean it together with his house." Crowd. Bai Shan was silent for a while and then asked, "You clean the front door for him, aren't your couriers angry?" "Don't be angry, I also swept the front of the inn opposite." Man Bao looked at Ren Ergu, who had an honest face, and couldn't help but burst out laughing. "They don't lack bedding, they already have it, but what about the soldiers and guards? Moreover, there is only one guy in the whole store, let alone eating. I am afraid that there is not enough hot water to burn." Bai Shan thought about it for a while, and called steward Lai Li, go to the next door and ask, what is the relationship between their inn and the guards of the city gate? Manager Li was taken aback for a moment, ask directly. Ask directly. Those of us who are not familiar with each other and don't have time to be polite with them, just ask directly. Steward Li responded, turned around and went out. Bai Shan and Man Bao looked up at the inn again and asked Ren Ergu curiously, when did your inn stop doing business? Ren Ergu shook his head, indicating he didn't know, and added, I thought I was busy before I came in, but when I came in, I realized that I was alone in the entire store, cleaning and scrubbing things every day, and the rest of the people were not there. Okay. The employer never owes wages, and he also gives me food, so I am happy. Man Bao saw that the stones on the steps were fairly clean, mainly because no one had left for too long, and they had been cleaned all the time. She simply sat down on the ground and beckoned him to sit down and talk. Ren Ergu declined and let them sit, while he squatted aside and said happily, we chatter like squatting. Man Bao said, we don't like it, our feet will numb when squatting. That's because you can't squat. People in our village like to squat. Seeing that he was so stupid and not very old, Bai Shan smiled and asked, how old are you this year? 19. Bai Shan, I'm not older than me, you haven't married a wife. He shook his head and said cheerfully, my third brother just married a daughter-in-law, and the family has no money. My mother told me to wait for another 2 years. When I save some money, the family can call me a daughter-in-law if I give it a little more. Already? Then is your home far from here? Will you feel homesick if you don't go back for a long time? Yes, Ren Ergu said, my house is far away from here, and I have to walk for a day. Usually I don't want to, but after I finish my work, I think about it. No one speaks to me here, only when you can go out and sweep the ground will you have a word with me. But the wages here are high, and food and housing are also included. The owner treats me well. They never ask me to work. They also say that these rooms are empty, but I can't be idle if I take the money, my mother said. I have to be diligent when working outside, so that the boss likes it. I have always been diligent. Ren Ergu vaguely knew that they were officials, so he racked his brains to praise himself, go to the room and see, even the dust in the corners has been wiped away. Man Bao nodded, what can be wiped clean is clean, but he forgot to ventilate, so there is a musty smell inside. Ren Ergu was very happy when he saw that they listened carefully and could answer a word or two to him from time to time. He hadn't talked to anyone so much for a long time. Even his brothers came to see him and said nothing. It's like be good and obedient, be diligent, don't spend money indiscriminately, save your money to marry a wife. But now these few guests won't tell these, but are very interested in his daily work, so in just a while, Bai Shan and the others not only know that he has 4 brothers and 3 sisters in his family, but also know that he has 4 brothers and 3 sisters. The errand was obtained by his mother entrusting the second son of his third uncle's sister's family to leave the post. To this end, their family also paid 2 sheep and 2 feet of good cloth. He had to pay back the sheep and cloth at home before he could save his own money to marry a wife. Bai Shan and the others also know that his boss, the Yuchen usually doesn't come here. It will only take a few days for them to meet at the door, and then the Yuchen will say a few words to him and then enter the opposite door. In. Of course, most of the time, Yuchen wouldn't talk to him, but just nodded with him and went in, so the shopkeeper Zhang next door could talk to him, and Ren Ergu was so happy to clear the road in front of the door for others. Sweep. Bai Erlang endured it, but couldn't hold back, and said to him, Yuchen is not your boss is the imperial court. No, it should be said that it is the county government, it is the prefectural government, you know. Ren Ergu shook his head blankly, and said to him, I was invited by the postmaster, and the wages were also given by the postmaster. Bai Erlang shouted oops, So what? The Yamen hasn't counted him as a dereliction of duty. Ren Ergu's heart tightened, and he looked at them anxiously. Are you going to arrest our boss? Although he is not very smart, he also knows that if the courier is gone, then he probably won't be able to work in the courier anymore. Bai Shan paused and asked, "Do you know the emperor?" Ren Ergu nodded. "Who doesn't know this?" "It's good to know," Bai Shan said with a serious face. "This inn belongs to the emperor." Ren Ergu widened his eyes. "The emperor is your boss, and the courier is just hired by the emperor to manage the inn, just like the shopkeeper Zhang next door. He's just a shopkeeper by Shandao, so your wages are given by the emperor to the courier, and he will act on his behalf. Everything that is given to you, including the food you eat, is also given by the emperor." Ren Ergu was so excited that his mouth trembled. My boss is the emperor." Man Bao and Bai Erlang turned their heads to look at Bai Shan together, and saw him nodding without changing his face. "Yes, it's the emperor." See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2238. Before Ren Ergu had recovered from the shock of his employer being the emperor, the postmaster came in from the outside with a smile, and saluted them from afar. "Pardon me, adults, I just went out for business and didn't have time to greet me." "How can adults sit here? Ergu can't wait to invite the adults to the main hall." Bai Shan and Man Bao looked at each other and stood up. They did not follow Yi Cheng's words and entered the main room, but stood aside with a distant smile. Mr. Zhuang, who heard the voice, came out of the main hall and took 2 cups. T's Nai Kenjun came out after him. Yi Cheng's eyes shifted from Bai Shan to Mr. Zhuang. Seeing Nai Kenjun behind him with a knife and wearing a 6th grade military uniform, he couldn't help but frown, but he still didn't change his face and was enthusiastic. Going towards Mr. Zhuang, he saluted and asked, "What do you call your lord? Where is this going?" Mr. Zhuang nodded slightly, and said alienatedly, "My surname is Zhuang, we are going to the western regions, you are a post station, I wonder if it is possible to arrange for us to stay." He pointed to Bai Shan and the others and said, "They are all accompanying family members. Where do you think the arrangement is appropriate?" It turned out to be Lord Zhuang. The postman said with an embarrassed look on his face, "Your Excellency should have seen it too, this post has been in disrepair for a long time, and it really can't live in people. Alas, I am also incompetent, I have no connections in the Yamen, I want to apply, repairs are always impossible. To tell the truth from the adults, I just went to the county government to do this, and it was long overdue and delayed to welcome the adults." The postmaster said, "Your Excellency is a businessman. Although our inn is broken and small, we cannot offend your lord. In this way, I will recommend an inn for your lord, and I will settle the settlement with the county government, and you will only need to pay for the excess." "It's totally unreasonable," Mr. Zhuang said angrily before he could finish his sentence. "I didn't expect that there would be such a dereliction of duty in Shazhu. The post station is damaged like this, but it still weighs your repair money." Yuchen's words were cut off, and he could only nod his head and continue crying, "Yes, but the adults also know that we are small officials, and we can't speak to the adults." "It doesn't matter," said Mr. Zhuang, "when we meet the Shazhu inspector, he will definitely say a few words of justice for you, and maybe we will be able to bypass the county government and directly transfer the repair money to you." Yuchen's eyebrows and eyes jumped, and his heart began to feel uneasy. He raised his eyes and looked at Mr. Zhuang. "Master Zhuang knows our prefect." Mr. Zhuang didn't say he knew him or he didn't know him, but said, "I always come to visit, don't worry, I'll definitely mention it then." "Are they going to leave without seeing the governor?" Just as he was talking, Steward Li came back lightly. Just because the Yuchen was standing by the side, it was difficult for him to come forward and bite his ears, so he just nodded at him. Bai Shan knew it in his mind, and while the postmaster had not continued the topic, he stepped forward and said respectfully, "Sir, Steward Lee has already reserved a room elsewhere, sir. It is better to go to rest first, and talk to the postmaster later. In detail, it's not very far away anyway." "All right," Mr. Zhuang nodded, turned to Nikenjun and said, "Let's go." Nikenjun couldn't help showing his teeth, and with a smile he led people around Mr. Zhuang and Zhou Man and went out. Bai Shan stayed behind, nodded with a smile and said, "My husband has always made a lot of promises, and he will definitely do it since he said it, you can rest assured." The postman opened his mouth wide and wanted to say that he could do it without the need for it, but the guards of the Bai family had already escorted Bai Shan out, and the soldiers and guards had also escorted the carriage out. The heavy rain and the others looked at Yi Cheng's face curiously, and then chased out with a smile, feeling strangely much better. Manager Li didn't have a room at all, but it wasn't difficult to get accommodation. In a word, if you have money, are you afraid that you won't have a place to live? The shopkeeper and the clerk next door were standing at the door, and they saw a group of them come out of the inn, and they did not go to the opposite side, but came towards them, and the leader was the steward who came to ask questions just now. Immediately refreshed, he immediately greeted him with a smile on his face, come in quickly, the guests are staying in the hotel, right? Come on, quickly vacate the last 2 yards for the distinguished guests." When Yi Cheng and Ren Ergu chased after Man Bao and the others, they had already entered the gate of the inn next door, and the first carriage followed the instructions of the clerk into an alley, which could lead directly to the 2 courtyards at the back. The postman opened his mouth and looked back at Ren Ergu for a while. "What did you tell them?" Ren Ergu hadn't recovered from the shock of Yuchen being so careful in front of Bai Shan and the others that his boss was the emperor. When he was asked such a question, he said dumbly, "Nothing to say, let's just say that I have 4 brothers in my family, and I have to save money to marry a wife." Okay, Yuchen interrupted him, frowning and thinking, although he really wanted to pull people out of it, he knew it was impossible. Not to mention that grabbing customers like this is a taboo in the industry, and behind Yunlei Inn is not someone who can grab customers without scruples. Yi Cheng frowned and thought for a long time, then turned to ask Ren Ergu, "Did they say I opened an inn opposite?" Ren Ergu is stupid, but not stupid. Although he didn't say it directly, but it means there should be, right? He lowered his head stubbornly, didn't dare to look up, and could only vaguely say, "I didn't say." Yuchen breathed a sigh of relief, but when he thought of the person next door now, Manager Zhang would probably take the initiative to mention it. He frowned and asked, "Did they say they would stay here for a few days?" This was not said, so Ren Ergu shook his head firmly. The postmaster frowned and walked away. "Really, why are these officials so serious? The post station is so dilapidated, shouldn't you even enter the door? How good it is to go directly to the inn, it seems that it is still the same." Although it was troublesome, Yuchen was not flustered. It was not that he had never encountered such a thing before, but it was easy to solve. Those officials who were on business trips would not be left to fight him for such trivial matters, so most of them were not. That's it. For the few that can't be settled, he will give some gifts and say more good things and it will be the end of the matter. The Yuchen walked away with his hands behind his back, but the shopkeeper Zhang, who was in the transport inn, carefully arranged their accommodation, the 2 courtyards, and the rest of the upper room, and all the rooms below were all ready for them. He said that even if he got out of the room, he would not put many people in. He would only arrange 10 people in a bed for 12 people in a room, and the room fee was the same. Hot water is provided for free, as well as hot soup, etc. Because they even stayed at his inn after Yuchen came, he felt that he had a fate with them and shared the same goals, so he warmly entertained them all the way, and said, "The distinguished guests want to eat here, I will send the distinguished guests tonight. A table of shredded radish is an appetizer in our store, and it's delicious." Manbao, who were planning to go out to eat after a break, immediately decided to eat here tonight. So the shopkeeper Zhang smiled and told the man to prepare the meal. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2239. Man Bao and the others shared their rooms and took their luggage back to the house. Manager Li came to report, Master, Miss Man, the inn's manager Zhang is under the command of General Meng's wife and brother, Master Zhang. It seems that several generals and generals in the military have stakes here. Man Bao was curious, are they fighting in the ring? With whom? Is it the governor of Shazhu? Bai Shan asked, is the inn opposite or the inn next door first? Manager Li was stunned for a moment, obviously he didn't ask this question, so Bai Shan asked him to ask again, when did this inn open? The governor of Shazhu has been in Shazhu for several years. Li Guanqi responded with a sound, went out and walked around and came back to the young master, there is the opposite inn first, and then the Yunlei inn, the inn has been open for 7 years, and he has only been in Shazhu for 3 years. Bai Shan and the others would understand that Inspector he was an outsider, at least on the face of it, so they didn't know who he would stand on in his heart. Yin or yawned and asked them, are you going to vent your anger? Bai Shan hesitated, so he went to ask Mr. Zhuang, and Mr. Zhuang waved his hand and said, how can there be so much temperament, we are just passing by, we will only stay for 2 days at most, there is no need to revenge them for such a thing, but this things can be a joke before he shishi. He took off his shoes and socks to soak his feet, and said to Bai Shan, take the doorposts full of treasures and deliver them to the governor's house. We will visit tomorrow. After meeting the local official, ask him to refer him to General Meng to get the documents for customs clearance. Bai Shan responded and first squatted down to wash Mr. Zhuang's feet and wiped them before going out with the foot washing water. Mr. Zhuang sighed comfortably and leaned on the bed still. With old arms and old legs, it is really not easy to travel far. Man Bao took out the balance of 50 taels of silver and gave it to Dayu. How many days are you going to stay in Shazhu? I'll invite you to dinner tonight. The silver was too heavy to fit in his arms, so the heavy rain carried it with his hand. He smiled and said, the enthusiasm of Imperial Physician Zhou is difficult to overcome, so we decided to stay for a few more days. Anyway, she has food and lodging, so they can just buy more things to go back. Although there are no merchants in the town, some coarse cloth and ceramics are also consumed locally. They can also make money, but they make a little bit of money. Man Bao didn't mind being taken advantage of by them, but just reminded, we may only stay here for 2 days. Heavy rain was actually a little curious, Dr. Zhou, isn't Shazhu more fun than our town? You've been in our town for 20 days, why don't you stay here for a while longer? Man Bao said solemnly, am I the kind of person who has fun? There are many herbs in your town that I haven't seen before. I went to see the herbs on the spot. Heavy Rain pouted, who was he lying, in their small town for 20 days, he had only seen her eat fish, gerbils, even scorpions in the desert, and poisonous round thorns. He didn't think it was for the sake of looking at herbs, but for eating, right? Man Bao himself was a little unconvinced, so he added a sentence, the big cities in the world are similar, but Shazhu has only a human pass that is different, but it is a military area, and it is not something we can enter, so let's wait and see from a distance. Just feel the majesty of it. Heavy Rain pondered for a while, and after thinking about it, that is to say, their town is different. He became complacent and said to her, yes, our town is very beautiful, and it is completely different from other places, otherwise we would not have fallen in love with it at a glance. When Dayu received the money, their trading relationship was over, but Man Bao was very generous and asked Manager Zhang to put their meal expenses and money on her account. They are officials from the capital. Although they are not very big, it is really not difficult to meet the governor. The guard sent the post to the governor's mansion, and after waiting for a while outside the yamen, There was a reply, so they came back to report, he said. He has time for 3/4 tomorrow. Man Bao said, then it will be noon in a quarter of an hour, and it will be noon when he speaks. Does he want to invite us to dinner? Mr. Zhuang patted her on the head and scolded with a smile, I've been thinking about food all day. The heavy rain on the other side of the dinner table nodded in agreement. However, Mr. Zhuang still took it to heart, so when he went out the next day, he took all 6 children with him, like an old man and an old lady who was going to have a wedding in the village. Bai Shan and others also dressed up and put on a better set of clothes with accessories hanging on them, and then set off with Mr. Zhuang high-spirited. After walking in the desert for more than 10 days, they were still quite greedy and didn't know the flavor of shazhu. Inspector he met them in the inspector's mansion, and when he entered the gate, Man Bao walked in front, and she led everyone in. When governor he saw her, his eyes flashed, he immediately got up with a smile and saluted each other with Zhou Man. He knew Zhou Man's origin and also knew Zhou Man's mission to the western regions. In fact, he has received official documents and news from the capital a long time ago. He is naturally curious and, revered for this famous Dr. Zhou, not to mention that she cured the crown prince's illness and gave the dynasty a royal family. The eldest grandson said that the smallpox in Xiaoshu, God knows how scared they were after the winter last year. Fortunately, the prescriptions they sent were effective, and there were not many patients with smallpox here. Those who brought some sick people into the city were controlled, and then they were isolated outside the city. He had seen the effect of the medicine with his own eyes, and it was much lower than the smallpox mortality rate he had seen as a child. I forgot to mention that he also suffered from smallpox. It was still a child. Although he was protected by his family in the back house, he never forgot the feeling of life and death. I heard that this prescription was improved by the imperial physicians of the imperial hospital based on the prescription given by the imperial physician Lu, among which the imperial physician Zhou contributed a lot. And this time Zhou Man went to the western regions for the prevention and control of smallpox. Although I don't know why a small country as backward as the western regions has such an important recipe, but it's okay, as long as there is it. Therefore, Inspector he did not stop them from leaving the city, and said very enthusiastically, this official sent someone to report to General Men yesterday, and it happened to be an appointment for him to have dinner in the Anning restaurant. It is better for Zhou Imperial Doctor to go with this official. It's a good time to mention this customs clearance document. Man Bao happily responded, and asked a little curiously, is it difficult to get customs clearance documents now? Inspector he sighed, the imperial physician Zhou came all the way from Xiaoshu, is it okay to walk on the way? Man Bao paused and said, it's okay, but many of the stations along the way are deserted, or there are no stations, so it's inconvenient. Inspector he, is this official saying that you haven't encountered bandits and horse thieves? Oh, I met a wave, Man Bao said with a nonchalant smile, but it has already been wiped out. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2240. Inspector he paused for a moment and couldn't help but wonder, which way did Imperial Physician Zhou come from? As far as he knew, from Suzhou to their Shazhu, a band of bandits had already taken over the section. Although it would not kill all passers-by, it would cost a lot of money to buy the road if they wanted to pass. And I haven't heard of the large-scale bandit suppression in Suzhou recently. Didn't they agree to be together after a period of time? Man Bao seemed to know what he was asking, and said, we didn't leave from Suzhou, but from the desert. But the desert is actually not safe. Inspector he wanted to speak, thought about it, and finally swallowed it. They have arrived safely. Besides, these are meaningless. Maybe they are lucky? On the other hand, Mr. Zhuang saw that he was hesitating to speak, so he couldn't help but interjected and asked. In his opinion, going out is no trivial matter, especially when they are carrying a lot of luggage. It looks like a fat sheep team on the way. It's more important to get as much information as possible, otherwise who knows what's going to happen where. Only after asking them did they realize how chaotic the place out of Xiaoshu was. According to He Shishi, from the north of Xiaoshu, people's hearts are somewhat floating, and the further west and north, the more such people and forces. Because these places were successively laid down by the Great Jin in the past 10 years, and these places are vast and sparsely populated. It's really wide and sparsely populated. It's okay to walk along the official road. If you walk for 2 or 3 days, you may barely encounter a village. After leaving the official road, there is a large area of deserted mountains and mountains. After Xiaoshu came out, although there was arable land, it was mostly grasslands and mountains. Many herdsmen lived only by water and grass, so the Yamen had little control over these people. Before the fall of Zhao Kang's country, the mind was already floating here. After Zhao Kang's fall, it shocked a group of people, so everyone was reluctant to be honest. The prefects and generals in Liangzhou, Suzhou, Shazhou and other places took the opportunity to suppress many bandits. Among them, the prefect he had the most outstanding achievements, because Shazhou had Yumengwan guards, and he joined the Mongolian general not only to go to the horse thieves in Suzhou. He defeated half of the bandits and drove the horse thieves outside the gate all the way. I didn't know where they went before. He should have been able to transfer back after his term expires in another 2 years, but smallpox came out. The rumors were ferocious before. First, Xiaoshu destroyed the city, and then patients flowed into the central plains. Smallpox broke out in the capital, and the emperor died suddenly. It is said that people with noses and eyes, not to mention ordinary people, even these serious officials, because they are too far away from the capital, have a momentary suspicion. Later, they began to calm down the rumors, but unfortunately it was too difficult to refute them, and because they were official, their words seemed to be naturally questioned. In any case, there were fewer people who believed them than who doubted. So people who are not honest are even more dishonest. Except for ordinary people who work diligently and diligently, everyone else ran to tell them, and some people who had experience with bandits picked up their swords again, and left the family directly or dragged the family to become bandits. Because of the smallpox, the number of merchants has been reduced by nearly half. If these bandits appear again, this half will be reduced by half. Now there are few merchants who are willing to enter and exit the customs. Man Bao thought about it for a while, and couldn't help but feel a little worried. What about Mr. Yu? Can he go back when the road is so dangerous? Only then did Inspector He know that they were on the same road with a merchant this time. He was refreshed and smiled with them. If this Master Yu is not in a hurry to leave, why not let him wait for another 2 months? He said, that time happened to be the busiest time of Yumen Pass, and the most merchants came here. He happened to change things and go back. It's not enough to change things if you don't have the ability to keep them. Obviously, what Inspector He is implying is external security conditions. Man Bao and the others naturally understood, so they nodded tacitly. The few people just exchanged greetings, and when the Inspector He saw that the time was almost up, he took them to the restaurant to wait for General Meng. General Meng looked at a middle-aged man in his 40s. He was tall and strong, and he was full of arrogance. As soon as he entered the box, he felt very oppressed. Naturally, he was not imposing. The imposing emperor of 2.8 meters. But the pressure brought about by height. He is really tall, the tallest person Man Bao has ever seen, so Man Bao's bright eyes swept across his body and focused on his knees, feeling that his height and physique should put pressure on his knees. Very large. Seeing Yin or standing inside, General Meng paused for a while, looked at it with some uncertainty, and frowned. What's the name of this little boy? Yin Or just stepped forward and said, Boy Yin Or, I have seen Uncle Meng. General Meng stared, is he really a boy from the Yin family? He looked up and down Yin Or, and saw that although he seemed to be a little undersized, his complexion was not as pale and colorless as before. Are you sick? Yin Or just smiled and said, it's much better, thank you Uncle Meng for your concern. General Meng's eyes fell on Zhou Man. Was it cured by Zhou Tai? Man Bao paused and said, it's not completely cured yet. Yin Or's illness, outsiders seem to have recovered, but these few of them know that Yin Or's illness is difficult to cure, and Yin Or himself knows it, but his mental illness is much better. The illness is full of medicines, so it looks like a normal person. Uninformed outsiders will only think that he is weaker than the average person, and it is not a big problem. But General Meng has also seen Yin Or what he looked like before. He has not been back to the capital for many years, but the last time he went back, he happened to meet Yin Or fell ill. At that time, the Yin family had already prepared a new coffin. After the arrangement was made, the Yin family even considered marrying a daughter-in-law for Yin Li. Chang Yichang was overjoyed. As a result, before the selection of people began, the old Dr. Tan pulled the person back from the gate of hell. At that time, he followed to take a look at the child, and the impression was only a small one lying in the quilt. His face was pale, there was no blood at all, and he spoke very quietly. He was very afraid that he would die if he said one more word. Over the years, General Meng still knew something about Yin Or's situation from the steward who went back to give the boxing ceremony, but either his health was not very good, or his health was not very good. General Meng looked at Yin Or and Zhou Man, and his attitude was much better. At first, he was a little skeptical when he saw that the imperial doctor was so young, but if he could cure Yin Or so, he should have great ability. General Meng paused, and then sincerely suggested to Zhou Man, if you want to leave the customs, it's better to wait for another 2 months. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2241. The situation inside the pass was not good, and the situation outside the pass was not much better. Zhao Kang was destroyed because of his collusion with the Turks, disrespectful to the emperor and Jin, and cut off the tribute. It can be seen from this that there is a considerable force in the branch of the Turks who fled in the western regions. The countries in the western regions were not very obedient to the Great Jin, but they had to surrender because of the might of the Great Jin and the emperor. Once bad news of the emperor came out, these people would react. In this regard, General Meng said very rudely, these people are mothers if they have milk. When your majesty is good, you cry out for money, and the court gives money and food to help them, but if your majesty is not good, others will just provoke a word or two, they made a noise, and all the previous affection and sweetness turned into false feelings. The rumor of smallpox is still undecided, but the news that the situation in Xiaohu has improved should soon spread among the people. General Meng was more frank than Inspector He on this point. He said directly, we will send troops in a month. To pacify the bandits all the way to Suzhou, the horse thieves outside the customs will be deterred to some extent. It will take about 2 or 3 months, and you will leave the customs at that time. He paused and said, it's just that the weather will be getting colder by then. You have to hurry up to reach the western regions before the heavy snow blocks the road. Man Bao counted the time and frowned slightly. There is nothing here that makes them interested in staying. Even if they are resting, they must be interested to be happy. Otherwise, it would be too boring to stay in one place for 2 or 3 months just to stay. Man Bao and Bai Shan couldn't help but look at Mr. Zhuang and Nai Jianjun. Nai Kenjun is responsible for protecting their safety, but he also needs to consider efficiency, so he doesn't want to stay here, otherwise he seems too incompetent. Mr. Zhuang was also hesitant. He could see that Bai Shan and the others didn't really want to stay here for too long, but he didn't really want to take such a risk. Bai Shan and Man Bao, who cherished their lives, hesitated because of this. They asked General Meng, is there no other way but to wait? Yes, General Meng said, fortunately, although there are fewer businessmen arriving at Yumen Pass now, it is not that they are not. They are lucky or strong, and they have not encountered horse thieves. When Man Bao heard this, he became energetic, and said reservedly, actually, we are also lucky. Bai Shan also nodded repeatedly, glanced at Man Bao and said, Man Bao is the most blessed, this should be no problem. Bai Erlang took it seriously. After all, she has the name of the reincarnation of a fairy, which shows her luck. Nai Kenjun immediately said, our strength is not bad. Not to mention the guards of the Bai family and the Yin family, he only brought 100 people under him, and the average horse thief may not have so many people. It's just that they are defensive, and the other party is rushing, so the other party is taking advantage of it. Nai Kenjun thought of something, and leaned into Bai Shan's ear and whispered, Master Bai, maybe you can ask Da Yu and the others to walk along for a while. It's the money. Nai Kenjun looked at Bai Shan. Bai Shan also remembered that if it was true what the governor and the others said, there were many forces in the desert who wanted to loot, then if it wasn't luck for them to come here safely, it was because of their leadership and existence. There is always a bit of face and jealousy between horse thieves, and so many of them are not decorations. Bai Shan thought about it, and after he went back, he asked 5 people to discuss, do you want to pay more, and ask them to come with us. Man Bao and Bai Erlang are used to it, and even if they feel distressed about money, they feel that life is the most important thing. On the contrary, Lu Huan hesitated, that will cost a lot of money, right? I think we have enough people, maybe we can't use 20 of them. Maybe it's useful, Bai Erlang said, I don't feel bad about money, why do you feel bad about it? Lu Huan glanced at him and said, am I simply distressed about money? I don't think it's worth it. It's not worth paying too much for a small risk. After all, he is the grandson of the minister of the Ministry of Housing. Even if he is a bit of a dude, he will weigh these things up. Bai Erlang said, that's not good, it's fine if there is no risk. Since we know there is a risk, how can we not prepare? My parents only have my youngest son, and I am only married. I haven't gotten married yet, so I can't hurt Mingda. Princess. Bai Shan nodded in agreement, my father and mother have only one son. What if my grandmother and mother die? And Man Bao is also there, so if something happens to the two of us, we will be the two of us. Man Bao nodded again and again, it's just money, you can still earn it if you don't have it. The jewelry we distributed last time was worth a lot of money. Just take out 2 of them, and when you get back to the capital, you will earn the money for inviting people. Yin, or someone who doesn't love money, his view of life is actually not as cautious as Bai Shan and the others, but he wants to go to the western regions to see. If so, he has to live, so he also nodded, please. Zhou Liru naturally followed her sister-in-law. She said, the loot I shared last time, there are 2 good pieces of cloth in the trophy. When the western regions take action, it will be enough for me, right? Man Bao nodded and said, enough, let's go, let's talk to them. The people who came from the town are the ones who are in charge of the heavy rain. As soon as he heard that Zhou Man and the others were willing to pay 200 taels and then hire them to accompany them to the western regions, he subconsciously bargained, that's not good. Going to the western regions is farther than coming from the town, at least 100 taels. Man Bao, this time we speed up and don't make more stops on the road. If the weather is good for about 20 days, we will arrive, which is only a few days longer than this time. Just look at her in the heavy rain, is it their fault for the long journey this time? It's not that you stop and go, so you have to look at it out of curiosity, and you have to take a look at it out of curiosity. Man Bao also seemed to be at a loss, so he turned the topic back with a light cough. It's cheaper, this time we have a limited time, and we will reach our destination within a month if there are no accidents. What is an accident? Man Bao enumerated, for example, when we meet a horse thief, for example, someone in our team is sick and has to stop, or when we encounter a storm. Anyway, it is a natural disaster and man-made disaster, and it is not our will. Hearing the heavy rain, he immediately said, that's even more expensive. You don't know, this western region is not the same as ours. Not only the weather is different, but the food is also different. It is easy for people to be unaccustomed to the soil and water. Imperial Physician Joe, you are so soft-hearted. If a person is sick, he has to stop. How much time will we have to delay? Just 300 taels, I won't ask you more. He said, it depends on our friendship, otherwise the silver taels of other caravans can't ask us. Bai Shan asked, do you want to bring goods to the western regions? Heavy Rain's eyes are a little erratic. Bai Shandao, if you bring goods, I can introduce you to Master Yu. Just as he was about to negotiate the price, he went to Mr. Yu's Heavy Rain. In the end, the two parties made a deal at a price of 260 taels. When the Heavy Rain sends people out, I always feel that I am at a loss, but I have already responded, and I can't regret it. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2242. Bai Shan and the others negotiated the price, and immediately went to General Meng to ask for customs clearance documents. Although General Meng frowned slightly, he still signed them and handed the document to them, and said, you come to the manor for dinner at night, and Inspector He and I will practice it for you. If it weren't for Yin or in the team, he would not be willing to interact with them too much, because Zhou Man and Bai Shan both carry the label of the prince. Man Bao and the others responded happily, and it was very pleasing to eat for nothing. Of course, they didn't just eat for nothing, they also mentioned their addresses during the banquet. We live in the Yunlei Inn next to the inn. If the governor he needs us to bring anything from the western regions, we can send the order back when we come back. Go to Yunlei Inn. Then, he mentioned the current situation of the inn. I heard he Shishi who was applying eye drops. He looked up at General Meng. Yunlei Inn can barely be regarded as the property of General Meng. General Meng didn't care much about this matter, and when he saw the provincial governor looking at him, he said, Liao Ning and I were at odds back then. It just so happened that there was a future station in Shazhou from Suzhou, and the postman opened an inn opposite. I was a little contemptuous of the post station, and the people under me were not angry, so I reported it to Liao Ning, but Liao Ning put it off because of me. My brother-in-law couldn't be angry, so he took the money to open another inn next to the post station. He said, the governor he also knows what's going on now. If you want to rectify the inn, just start, don't worry about transporting it to the inn. The inn is actually a trivial matter, so although the governor he was a little dissatisfied with the inn being abandoned, but because the inn opposite the inn was opened by the inn, and the magistrate of Guo County took a stake in the inn after the former governor Liao Ning left. The inns run by General Meng and his family are considered to be the two most powerful parties in Shazhou vying for the business of the post station. In order to better carry out his work, he turned a blind eye. Anyway, there were not many officials received by the inn throughout the year, and most of the time it was still for civilian use. Although he lost a sum of money, it was better than facing the magistrate and garrison general of his largest county at the same time. Since General Meng said he doesn't care, then the magistrate of Guo County doesn't need to care. He is his immediate boss, isn't he? Mr. Zhuang did not expect this development, and raised his eyebrows. Bai Shan smiled and said, that's all, the postmaster. The guy in the post, called Ren Ergu, is a rare honest and diligent person. He only mentioned one sentence, but Inspector he kept it in his heart. He already knew that the identities of these teenagers were not simple, not to mention Yin or, Lu Huan was the grandson of the minister of the Ministry of Housing, the youngest son of Su Zhouchenqi, and Bai Chen was the future concubine, the emperor's son-in-law, and Bai Shan was a young scholar, deeply favored by the king. This 1 or 2 is not easy, it's just to promote a little guy, it's worth selling them a favor. But Man Bao and the others couldn't see it. The day after they got the paperwork, they packed up and left the city. Master Yu Yi said goodbye and went to the city gate to send them off. Half of his goods were sold, to Da Yu. At first, they only bought it in the heavy rain. Later, Bai Shan and the others took a look around their luggage, and they bought some fabrics with gold and Mr. Yu to stuff them into the luggage. So Mr. Yu sold half of the goods, even if it was an acquaintance's it was a little cheaper for them, and he made a lot of money. Master Yu thought that he might leave in 2 or 3 months, and that he might still be able to be with them, so he stood at the gate of the city and waved to them, "Mr. Here, let's go back to Xiaohu together. It's safe to travel with them, except that it takes more time." Man Bao also rode on his horse and waved to him, and replied, "No problem, if you are still in Shazhu then, we will definitely call you. When the time comes, they will switch to another route, and Mr. Yu sees that he is someone who is very familiar with the journey, so he just happens to listen to his explanation." General Meng stood on the tower and watched them galloping away on horseback, and shook his head slightly. Major General Meng was puzzled, "Since my father is worried about them, why does he still give them the documents to leave the customs?" General Meng said, "People are not frivolous and juveniles. Which of them do you think is a mediocre person? Although the risk is very high, how can it not be their opportunity? I have done my job of reminding, and the rest is their decision." After he finished speaking, he glanced at his son and felt that everything was fine, but he was too old-fashioned. In comparison, the young man below was better. He didn't know that Bai Shan and the others were more stubborn, and paid a lot of money to hire a group of former horse thieves as guards. Bai Shan hit his horse to catch up with the heavy rain, and asked curiously, "Did you send a letter to the mayor?" Heavy Rain said indifferently, "We went out to look for it yesterday, and there were no merchants who wanted to go to the town, so I didn't send it." He said, "We left a message at a restaurant we knew each other in the city, and we'll know if someone in the town comes to ask." Bai Shan felt that their hearts were also quite big. Heavy Rain didn't care. They used to be horse thieves who licked blood at the knife's edge. When they have money, they must make money. If they miss it, they will disappear. This year, because of the epidemic and local chaos, it is difficult to make money. The group of people talked and laughed and ran to the side, and the carriage also accelerated. Man Bao and the others ran in front with a few guards to see if there were any tea stalls or the like in front of them. There are green mountains outside Yumen Pass. According to the Heavy Rain, it takes 2 days to walk into a desert. In the desert, you have to walk slowly. He said, "There is an ancient road in the desert, and there are few water plants in the middle, which is very different from ours. I heard that there used to be a Lilan country there, and when you arrive there, you are considered to be in the western regions." Heavy Rain and the others walked this road. I don't know if they left when they were horse thieves or after they started to pick up escorts and other business, but he still understood, and told them about the towns and tribes they would pass along the way. In short, from the time they entered the desert to Jiaokang, they were basically in the desert, and there were very few oases in it, so they had to replenish enough water every time they crossed the oasis. He said, "The desert is different from the grassland, don't run around, once you get lost, you won't be able to find it back." He stated in advance, "If you get lost, we will not look for it, but will ask the team to continue to move forward until Jiaokang. Several people, you can rest assured that we will not run around." The Heavy Rain was satisfied, and followed them to the front, disgusting, "Your team is really slow. Man Bao, I don't believe you have ever received a caravan that is faster than ours. This is, the general caravan is not as arrogant as Joe Man and the others, and can almost reach one person and one horse, but... Heavy Rain glanced at them. You promised, you will never waste time on the road. Man Bao nodded in response, don't worry, don't worry. See you at 6 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2243. There really was a tea stall on the road, so they ate a hot meal at the tea stall at noon. After they finished eating, they decided to take a break and set off. When they saw two horses running on the way, the people on the horses were carrying big horses. I got off the horse with my luggage, asked the store for 2 pancakes and a bowl of soup, and then sat on a chair outside to eat. The Heavy Rain couldn't help squinting to look at them, and Nikanjun and Director Li also looked at them. Bai Shan and Man Bao noticed the difference in the atmosphere, and turned their heads to look at them. Bai Shan frowned, I seem to have seen them before. Man Bao looked up and down, and felt a little familiar. He was about to ask Keek when the two got up and walked towards Steward Li with the cooking cake. She looked over and didn't ask Keek. The rich and his companions were behind him, and he didn't want to look for Li, but he couldn't help it. Their gazes were too compelling, and he always felt that if they were slower, they would doubt his identity. The two of them went up to Director Li and asked to go with him, saying that they would also go to the western regions, but they were only 2 of them because of the long distance, so. Director Li looked them up and down and remembered, are you 2 of those who came to see me the day before yesterday? The rich and humble replied yes and begged Steward Li, the family urgently needs money, so I can't take the risk to go to the western regions at this time, please talk to the adults, let us follow the team, you can rest assured, we will follow from a distance, and we will never disturb the adults. This kind of thing is actually not uncommon. Some scattered merchants will rely on large caravans for safety, and some merchants will give a gift to the large caravan, and then follow from a distance without asking them. Asylum, as long as you can follow. But these 2 excuses. Steward Li glanced at their horses, nodded, then got up and said, I'll go ask our master. He leaned over to Bai Shan and Man Bao and whispered, not long after we arrived in Shazhu the day before yesterday, a group of people came over when we went out to replenish rice and noodles, and said they wanted to follow our motorcade to the western regions. He said, I felt that there were a lot of people in our team, and it would be cumbersome to bring people, so I refused. At that time, these 2 people were among them, but I didn't expect them to find them today, and they said they were sleepy at home. Urgently need money. He glanced at their horses and said in a low voice, you can see that this is an excuse. If the family urgently needs money, they should sell the horses. What's the use of rushing to the western regions to make money? Steward Li meant to reject them. Bai Shan frowned and asked, where did you meet them, why do I think they look so familiar? Nikanjun, who was on the side, immediately said, young master Bai, I also think they are familiar, but they shouldn't have seen each other in the past 2 days. Man Bao asked Keek, I also think they are familiar, Keek, where have I seen them? Keek screamed it out and said, in the desert inn. At the same time, Bai Shan also lowered his voice and said, I seem to have seen it in the desert inn, yes, in the desert inn, the group of people who had a conflict with us in the bath house, they were not with you outside the inn that evening. Then wrestling? I've seen him in the crowd. Although he didn't seem to make a move, people were indeed there. Nikanjun froze and said incredulously, no, they are here for revenge? Are they so careful? The Heavy Rain who was sitting at the next table couldn't bear it any longer. He leaned over and asked, what are you talking about, can you speak a little louder, I can't hear you. Everyone glanced at him and said nothing. Bai Shan paused and asked, do you think those 2 are familiar? Heavy Rain curled his lips and said, I haven't seen them before, but I am familiar with the smell of them. He said, the smell on their body now is the same as the smell on our body before. No explanation, but everyone understood, this is a horse thief. Man Bao was refreshed and couldn't believe it, do we look so good at robbery? After thinking for a while, Du Yu said, it's weird. Usually, even if you want to robbery, you won't come to the door so early, and you take such a big risk to follow up in person. Are there people not here? The two rich people were a little anxious. They were far away from Zhou Man and the others. They could only see them whispering together, but couldn't hear the specific content. No way, there are many people in their convoy, and these people are surrounded by the middle from the moment they get off the horse, and they can't get close at all. Bai Shan glanced at them, and said to Steward Li, promise them, ask them for some money, and directly pierce their lies, saying that they don't believe that their family urgently needs money, but want to follow us to the western regions to make money. In this case, just show some sincerity. Li Guanqi was startled and whispered, Master, isn't it a good idea to let them follow? Bai Shan said, it's worse not to let them follow. It's better to keep people under your nose. After speaking, he looked at Nai Kenjun and said in a low voice, I also asked Nai Kenjun to ask the scouts to look back and forth to see if anyone else is following us. Nai Kenjun responded. Li Guanqi went and returned with 10 taels of silver in a short time, and handed it over to Empress Bai Shan and said, Young master, I asked each of them for 5 taels of silver. Bai Shan took the silver, and seeing Bai Erlang watching intently, he gave him one and the other to Man Bao. He nodded and said, give them a position close to our carriage. That is the middle position, so the 2 less people behind will not attract attention at all. After the convoy restarted, 2 scouts went out to the front to investigate, and 2 quietly fell behind. They quietly pulled the horses into the forest, and only mounted their horses and left after the convoy could no longer see them. Go back to Yumengwen to investigate. Although the Yumen Pass is not stable, there are still stations and platforms. It's just that the inn is very small, and it can't accommodate more than 100 of them. Fortunately, it is summer, and the night is not very cold, but there are many insects. Man Bao and the others lived in the inn, while others were stationed around the inn. The 2 ate and drank separately from them. Man Bao stood upstairs and glanced at them, then turned to go to the kitchen, glanced at the lamb soup they ordered, and added a little something to it. The cook on the side. Man Bao snorted at him and said, don't talk outside. The cook didn't say anything, but told Yuchen. Thinking of their exit documents and official seals, the postmaster gritted his teeth and said, don't worry about it, just don't go out in the kitchen. Then let another guy bring the soup out. The most common soup here is sheep soup. Soldiers and guards also have 2 large buckets of sheep soup. Steward Li, who watched Miss Man prescribe the medicine with his own eyes, went to make a bowl of soup, then walked over to the 2 of them and said with a laugh, forgive me, brothers, we only take you with us, you have to bring your own food and lodging. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2244. The 2 said that it was all right. They also took the pancakes and poured a bowl of soup from the bowl of soup on their table and drank it as much as Steward Li. Apparently they didn't take the medicine that Man Bao had given, so Steward Li breathed a sigh of relief. After eating, Fu Fu felt a little heavy on his eyelids. He lowered his head little by little, almost falling asleep, but he suddenly woke up. No, it was not dark, how could he want to sleep? He tried hard to hold his eyelids, but found that the eyelids were still getting heavier and heavier. His eyes widened slightly, trying to get himself up, but he couldn't help being sleepy and fell headfirst on the table. Li Guanqi was amazed at the sight. He couldn't help but picked up their soup and smelled it, but there was no special smell, so he couldn't help looking up at Zhou Man and others lying on the second floor. When Man Bao saw that they were on their knees, he ran downstairs, followed by Bai Shan and the other 5 enthusiastically, watching the two of them together. Man Bao stretched out a finger and poked his head shook and fell to the side, completely unconscious. Satisfied, she said excitedly, "It's really useful, the magic formula given by the shopkeeper Zheng is very useful." Bai Shan also poked the other person's head, making sure that he couldn't be more dizzy, then he was satisfied, "It's very good." The heavy rain came up to look at it and asked, "Why are you dizzy?" Man Bao said, "There is a specialization in the art industry, so naturally it is handed over to Nijian. Nijian tied the people and threw them into the woodshed, and asked, "How long can they faint?" Man Bao said unsurely, "Dizzy until tomorrow." Nijian, "We have so many people who can take it directly. If the adults are worried that the movement will make a big noise and let their accomplices know, but the scouts have returned, no enemy has been found either before or after. Why do you need a drug?" Man Bao, "Don't you want to try it?" "Forget it, I'll find a way to wake them up." Before going out, Man Bao had prepared a lot of things. In addition to some prescriptions that Mr. Mo helped to find, there were all kinds of intoxicating medicines, itching medicines, and cartilage powders, which were presented as a friendly gift from shopkeeper Zhengde, Xiao Yuan Zheng, Lu Tai, and others. "It's not particularly powerful, it's just a little bit more powerful than some medicines on the market. Forgive her for growing up so much, but she has never used these things after studying medicine for many years, so now she has a chance and can't hold back." Man Bao silently went to grab the medicine and boiled it for them. The drug is powder, mixed with sheep soup, and has little taste, but the antidote is bitter and sour. Nijian asked a guard to directly pour the medicine down, and then a group of people squatted at the door of the firewood room and watched the two of them. After waiting for more than a quarter of an hour, his eyelids moved and he wanted to wake up. As a result, the other party tried hard and closed it again, and Man Bao was a little embarrassed and said to everyone who looked at her, "This drug has a better effect." After waiting for another quarter of an hour, the squinting man suddenly woke up. Fu Fu almost immediately sat up, only to find that his hands and feet were tied. He stared at Zhou Man and the others who were looking at him. "I." Bai Shan smiled and raised his hand to greet him, "Awake." Fu was calm, the hands tied behind him were tightly clasped together, and his face was full of fear. "Big adults, what do you want to do?" Bai Shan said softly, "Don't be afraid, we are old acquaintances, and we won't punish you." The rich eyelids trembled. "I don't understand what your lord said. Did you admit the wrong person? We've never met before." Bai Shan smiled and said, "It hasn't been a long time, but it's only been over a month. My memory isn't that bad. Besides, there are more than 100 people here, and there's more than one person who recognizes you." He sighed, "You're too careless, it's better to change someone who wasn't there at the time to come with us, or change your face." "Rich, do you think he doesn't want to, but the boss only left 3 people for him, and one stayed in Shazhu City and others, and he could only take one person with him." He stared at Bai Shan silently with his eyes open for a long while, closing his eyes and ignoring them when he was sure they really recognized him. When everyone saw his reaction, they were immediately excited. They really didn't wrong anyone. This is the group of people they met in the desert inn, the Breath of Horse Thieves, and they secretly wanted to infiltrate their team, using their toes to think about it. Know what bad idea they have. Bai Shan picked up a piece of firewood and poked him at random, and asked with a smile, "Let's talk about your companions. The bearded guy who was with you at that time was your boss. Where is he?" Fu Fu sneered, "Young master, don't waste your time, if you can kill me, I won't tell you." Bai Shan smiled and said, "My ability is not reflected by killing you alone, you just say it without saying it." He got up and looked at Nijian, nodded and said, "Leave it to Nijian." Nikanjun nodded. Manbao and the others went out, ready to wash up and sleep. What should I do? I can't take them with me, can I? Yu, who has been following along for the fun, said, just kill it, what's the use of keeping it? Anyway, he won't confess. Bai Shan glanced at him, turned his head and asked Manbao, what do you think? Manbao said, I think they should be sent to the Yamen. Bai Shan also nodded, I think so too. It's not very far from Yumen Pass. It's fine to let the two of you rush back tomorrow. They will hurry up after that. We'll take a rest in the desert, and we'll catch up. The heavy rain was startled and asked, why do you still need to rest? Bai Shandao, didn't you say that you need to replenish drinking water when entering the desert? Also, didn't you say that it's best to add a few camels to the desert this time? Manbao clenched his hands and said, I've only heard of camels, and I've seen them in pictures, but I haven't seen a real camel yet. The topic went awry. Heavy Rain opened his mouth several times but failed to bring the topic back. Nikanjun stayed in the firewood room for 2 hours, during which time everyone heard screams coming from inside, but everyone didn't change their faces, and no one stepped forward to ask curiously. Manbao and the others had already closed the door and slept. Even the postmaster sat in the shop and dozed off. After watching the heavy rain for a long time, he finally sat down by the fire and said to his friends, looking at a group of people who are kind-hearted, it's really ruthless, everyone has tightened their skins, don't steal and play tricks just because they are good at talking, they still have half of the money that they haven't paid us. The guards in the town responded in a low voice, and then they could not help guessing curiously, Brother Yu, where do you say their people are? Heavy Rain, how do I know, but it's strange to hear that his tone doesn't sound like ours. They don't rob the caravan, so why are they robbing court officials? See you tomorrow.